Certainly, yeah, I couldn't fail. I mean,
Right.
my parents were not wealthy. Dad was, I worked in the summer to make money to help with the college costs.
On the 20th episode of 18avenuepodcast.com, my guest this week is digital artistry photographer Ric Matkowski. He was born and educated in Twirl, Saskatchewan. He started his career as an engineer in the energy sector here in Alberta, then internationally including Egypt, UK, Scotland, and the US. Ric spent his childhood on a farm. His grandparents immigrated to Canada from Poland in those days, and farming was the only profession they knew. His father was a hands-on man who had a passion for learning, but never had the opportunity to properly school. He homeschooled himself and went on to start a radio and television business. His mother worked in various jobs and took correspondence courses at the university. Ric was no stranger to hard work. His family was not wealthy. He took summer jobs to cover college tuition. He would be the first to go to university and graduate, and for him, failure was not an option. Today, Ric serves as VP to Calgary Camera Club. He is also chair of Professional Photographer of Canada Central Branch. Ric's artistic style and work has been featured in various magazines, and his art was also selected for the 2020 Calgary Stampede exhibit pre-cancellation. If you like this content and would like to support this channel, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel, Facebook, and IG account. For those long drive and walk and physical activity, catch the latest episode of 18avenuepodcast.com on Apple, iTunes, and Anchor. By the way, this is a 2-part episode which will be released Sundays and Tuesdays. But if you cannot wait, please head to 18avenuepodcast.com to listen to the full audio now. Thank you. And now with Ric Matkowski. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 18avenuepodcast.com. My name is Rico Bottles, and today joining me here is my very special guest.
Hey, Rico, it's Ric Matkowski.
I love it, Ric. Look, we're going to get into all of that, but I'm going to take a moment to remind the people why they're listening to the show. On 18th Avenue Podcast, we talk to people of all walk of life. They share their stories, their culture, their passion right here on the platform. And today, my guest is no different. We will be doing the same thing. Some of you may already know who he is. You may recognize him from around town. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome my guest, Ric Matkowski.
Well done, Rico.
I got it. Oh my God. I was like, oh, I'm going to mess it up.
Nice to be here, Rico. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you for being here. How are you doing?
Good. Pandemic and all, we're okay.
All right. You know, you can't complain so much.
No one will listen. So
that's what they keep saying, eh?
Just go ahead. Just do what you got to do.
So, Ric, let's get right into it. Tell me about your background. Tell me about your upbringing.
Well, I'm a farm boy from Saskatchewan, ultimately. My grandparents, both sets, came over from Poland in the early 1900s, homesteaded out in Saskatchewan. My parents were born in that area, in and around, actually, Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. That's ultimately where I was born, but then started life on a farm, a little town, I don't even know if it exists anymore, Tway, Saskatchewan, on the farm. And we stayed on the farm till I was about 5 years old, and then was off to another small town where my dad was also running a radio and television business, service repair, sales, and into Waka, Saskatchewan. Town of about 1,000 people, and that's basically where I finished my high school. Thereafter, it was, college, what do you want to do? I like my sciences, my math, so it was, engineering seemed like the way to go, so off we went to Saskatoon. Waka's about 50 plus miles outside of Saskatoon. So off to college, mechanical engineering, 4-year program. Came out of that, and then it's like, where do we go? Of course, at that time, it was a lot of opportunities, and ultimately ended up here in Alberta in Edmonton. Very soon after, up to Fort McMurray in the heavy oil, the early days of heavy oil, the tar sands. And then, of course, 1981 came along, and Premier at that federal government at that time introduced the National Energy Policy, which killed the industry. And I was working with a big American company, Amoco, and it was then offered the opportunity to go international, which I took, and that took me on to Egypt. For 9 years. In that period, I met my wife, who was Canadian, and we moved over there, started having family. Then from Egypt to London, UK, then up to Aberdeen, Scotland for 4 years. A couple more kids along the way in Scotland.
Wow.
And then back to Houston to international operations. And then ultimately back to Egypt in 98 until we left there in 2012 and came back to Calgary. So that's my engineering life in a nutshell. A great opportunity. Of course, we traveled a lot with the business, because in that whole period, I switched companies a couple times.
Right.
The last was an exciting adventure. It was with an Egyptian operator who had interests in a lot of different places, Pakistan to Sudan, etc. So we, with investment money coming from Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Saudi, so a lot of travel to see our investors, to see our assets. Of course, with the kids going to Cairo American College, a great opportunity to travel through their sports into Europe and the Middle East and the Far East and Africa. And so we joined with them on a lot of their adventures, and so it was a great time for sure. Very fortunate to see that part of the world, to live in all those cultures, to deal with people of many different cultures.
That's amazing. And Rick, thank you so much for sharing that. I want to go back to when you are a kid. You mentioned that you're a farm boy.
That's correct.
And I can relate to that because I'm a farm boy myself. So going back as a kid, what inspired you? You will mention that you go into engineering later on. Were someone in your family an engineer? How did that come about?
No, well, as I mentioned, the grandparents came over. They were non-educated, so they were farmers. My father had an older brother who had the opportunity to go on to college and education. But being there was only the two boys, then my dad got pulled out of school after finishing 9th grade and said, "You're going to farm." So there was no one around me immediately outside of that one uncle who had a college education. I think my dad saw it as an opportunity that I swear he would have been a heck of an engineer had he been given the opportunity. I think he saw when I had an interest in those things, he was fully supportive, and so off we went. And engineering just seemed to be the easy choice, and it's been a great career. There's nothing wrong with that decision, but I had no direct influences other family, immediate family that was educated in a college degree. I was probably the first. I know I was the first out of. I'm the eldest out of the siblings of my parents' siblings and whatnot. So out of my first cousins, I'm the eldest, and was the first one into college. Now since then, of course, many of them.
Was that like a lot of responsibility? Did you feel a lot of pressure on your back?
Well, I couldn't fail. I mean, my parents were not wealthy. Dad was, I worked in the summer to make money to help with the college costs. But Dad supported me, and I knew he didn't have the money. So the only pressure I felt was the pressure not to fail. In other words, get in there and get it done. High school was easy for me. Going to college, you soon get a slap in the face that tells you, you're not as smart as you think you are.
Right.
Or you have to work. And that's the first time I can remember the first year I flunked a little midterm, and it just floored me, right? That had never happened to me before. So
wow.
Certainly, I got refocused.
Did you cry?
No, I didn't cry. But
Okay.
I was disappointed, man. It was a shocker.
I think I failed a test once and I cried. Yeah.
It was a shocker.
Yeah.
And it just showed me, you got to work for it.
Yeah.
And again, there was no way I was going to let my dad down. Not a hope. So got re-engaged, and then the marks picked up. Not that I was in jeopardy of falling out, but
Right.
it's just, and then finished,
But there was that
finished strong.
initial like.
And I look around. There's many others went to college with it, turned a 4-year program into 5 or 6. Right. I didn't have that luxury. Plus, then it was a question of I knew I wanted to get out and make my own money. Right. So the sooner I got out of college and got hired on by somebody, the sooner I would make my own money.
Yeah. So it appears to me that you and your family have a very good relationship, from your father understanding and being all supportive. Where was your mother at this time?
Well, Mom was certainly there. Mom was working various jobs. She as well, though. I mean, I can remember in high school was taking night classes and different correspondence courses to better herself, to get. I don't know if she ended up actually with a college degree at the end of it or not. I'd have to ask her. But Dad too. I mean, during those years, some of it that I don't remember, some I do. I mean, he would take. I mentioned radio and television sales and service. Well, this is a man who finished 9th grade, so how did he get there? Well, he took correspondence courses at the time. There was a lot of courses available out of the States. I know some out of Chicago he took. And based on his homeschooling, he started a radio and television business. He also took motor mechanics that way, right? So, like I say, I think he understood the value of education. He just never had the opportunity. He was the younger of the 2 boys who had to quit school. His father said, "No, you're farming," and that was that, right?
Yeah.
But that didn't stop him from learning. And I often reflect on it. I like to learn. I just, that's inherent to me, and I believe I get that through probably both my parents, right? They never had the chance to go on to college and take that route through life, but that didn't stop them from bettering themselves, right?
Right.
Continuously learning. Even to the day my dad died, after he retired from farming, he got into making wine and computers and repairs and stuff like that. Right?
Just self-taught that.
Just doing it, yeah. Self-taught. So I think I picked up a lot of that in me, which I'm thankful for, right?
Yeah.
I have to continuously be learning something.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Keep this muscle between the ears active and engaged, right?
Well, I read that once you stop learning, when we're younger, we tend to have so much things that we want to do and achieve, but that's because we're constantly learning new things. The older we get, we start to slow down, and that happens with our mental capacity as well.
Yeah, and I've got a personal theory, and I've seen it through some people close to me. If you retire and shut down and then fail to do anything other than maybe, I like my golf too, but to hit the golf course all the time and not keep the mental side engaged. Dementia, are you more susceptible? I'm not a doctor, so I don't know, but I feel I need to give myself the best chance to fight that and just to keep the mind active and engaged. And I don't believe it can hurt. And it's certainly better than sitting there watching a lot of television every evening, which is just garbage for the most part.
Keep your mind alive, learn. I think that's incredible. Now, you're a man who has lived in, you live in Egypt. You live in, was it Scotland?
Yeah, Scotland.
You live in Scotland.
London.
London. You live in places around the world. You've even gone to Africa, South Africa. Of all the places you've been, I want you to narrow down, because I and my friends have never been able to do this correctly. But you're also a Westerner as well. What would you say the characteristics that describe the Western culture? What would be the best depiction of it?
Well, it depends on what part of the West. I mean, 'cause there's a wide spectrum of how.
So we talked
behave.
about let's keep it here. Let's keep it local.
I think let's talk about Canadians abroad.
Okay.
For the most part, behave themselves well, are well respected, respect others, have good manners, and I don't care where you are in the world. Any person, all they want is respect.
That's true.
And if you're respectful of them, they will be respectful of you. And what I found is generally, I don't care my Egyptian friends to my Scottish friends to others that I've met in Pakistan and whatnot. The core to all of us is the same. People just want to be given a good opportunity in life, to have a family, to be healthy, happy, to be able to live without interference, to do their thing. And that's consistent. I don't care where you are in the world, what religion you are. Those things are the same. At the common man's level, those are all the same. Where we get in trouble, where the world gets in trouble, is through politics and our governments. And that's when it gets ugly, right? And then perceptions are made of a Western culture, for example, that I certainly dealt with a lot of Americans. I've got a lot of American friends. But for a while there, they were perceived with an attitude of, coming in there loud and brass and my way or the highway type of thing. Well,
right.
Are there people like that? Probably. But I met so many others that are not like that. Again, people that were respectful of other cultures and succeeded in all of these international locations. So, again, getting back to their Canadian ways, Canadians are known for being, respectful and apologetic. The sorry. If you listen, most Canadians say sorry umpteen times in a sentence, right?
Right.
Which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And people around the world may not understand why you're saying it so many times, but they will appreciate it. It's coming from a heart if you were truly speaking from the
Absolutely.
heart. And so, I found, on the streets of Cairo, humor, respect. You may not be able to communicate exactly in the language,
Right.
but through the physical language, you can get a message across.
Right.
And have a great time, and actually be shown. I have gotten into situations. I can remember a time when, in the 80s, driving down to Sharm el-Sheikh, we started diving down in the Red Sea down there. At that time, it was very pristine and wasn't covered up with hotels. And
so you used to dive?
Yeah, I'm a certified diver at PADI. And we drive down the Sinai, which at that time was a very narrow, asphalt, but cold mix, is rough road. Flat tires were common, and now it's late. We're pulling into a little place called El Tour, trying to find somebody to fix a tire. But you go knocking on some doors, and you're respectful and kind, and you get the message across. And doggone, if the guy didn't get up out of bed, go open up his shop, and then when you go out of the shop, it doesn't look like much, right? You're not expecting much. Well, he opened the door, and I swear to God, it was the most modern equipment you'd ever find out in the middle of the Sinai. And he fixed that tire. I think at this time we're 1, 2 in the morning, and off we go. We were able to continue our trip. So again, just treat people like you'd want to be treated, and they'll help you. They'll take care of you.
Yeah. Why do you think that we seems to just not do or apply these simple principles?
Well, it's some of it is the way people are brought up.
Right.
I think that's part of it. I was fortunate. My background was from a background where it was respectful of other people. So that's part of it. Ultimately, when you're dealing with people of other colors, it's easy sometimes to put them in a bucket there because you can't communicate so clearly, right?
Right.
And maybe you don't speak their language and they don't speak yours. So then and maybe the color of their skin is different, and maybe their religion is different. So you tend to bucket them in a different bucket than yourselves, right? Mm-hmm. And when you start doing that, that's when things don't work so well, right? I find that if you, people are just people. If you treat everyone the right way, things will work for you. They'll take care of you.
Yeah, I'm so happy we're touching up on this. And now I want to ask you, before the camera got turned on, one of the first things, the conversation we were having was about your sons.
Yep.
After you lived in Egypt and having to come back to North America and Canada, and I guess you moved to Saskatoon before coming to Alberta, or how did that?
Well,
okay.
No, because I'd gone to the U of S when the kids finished school in Cairo and wanted to go on to college. I guess it was, and because we had family in Saskatoon, the boys started going back to, and because they'd been there in summer vacation, it just seemed like a natural place to go to U of S, which is a good university as well. It's well respected. So that's why they headed back to Saskatoon. Of course, and then my daughter, when it was her turn, she wanted to go somewhere a little different, and education was where she wanted her career to go, so she went to the University of Lethbridge. She wanted to be a little different than her brothers.
Right.
So they came back, but I was mentioning to you before we started, for those that are familiar, the term third culture kids.
A third culture kid. I was just going to make a note of that, yeah.
And they truly were third culture kids. Books were written about these kids because, their parents are Canadian, yet they're born overseas. Our eldest actually were in Egypt in the late 80s, and my wife came back to Regina, and he was born in Regina, and 4 weeks later they were back on the plane coming back to Cairo. But the other two were born in Scotland. And so born of Canadian parents with Canadian passports, but born in different countries, yet when you look at them, they weren't Egyptian, all those years when we were living in Egypt and finished up in Egypt.
Right.
So they're not Egyptian. But they're Canadian, but by passport only. So what are you? Well, that's hence the third culture, right? And so they had a tough time when they came back to college. In parties and in conversations. Well, where are you from? Very difficult question for them to answer.
Right.
Even to this day, they would probably tell you Cairo.
Right.
Although probably now, if you ask them in a business sense, they'd say, well, I'm from Saskatoon or from Edmonton.
Right.
But at the time, it was a very difficult question for them to answer. And they struggled, kind of fitting in. It gives you a sense of what anybody new to the country is facing. Until you gain some time here and some history, and now of the conversations, you've got something to talk about.
Right.
That's Canadiana. But when they first came back, it was difficult. What did you do there? And, of course, they would explain their life, which was a lot of travel. Well, of course, to a lot of the kids here, it sounded like braggatory.
Oh, absolutely.
In which it wasn't. I mean, it's just simply, I was given no choice. We lived and worked abroad, and if I wanted to participate in scholastic sports through the school and travel, well, that meant through the Middle East to Greece to Dubai to Abu Dhabi, Qatar,
right.
Or up into Europe. I mean, that's just the way it was, But again, for the local kids here who maybe came from small town Alberta or small town Saskatchewan, this sounds like something
right
out of this world, right?
Some of my earlier experiences, being in Canada, of course, that question, and a lot of people don't really, think about it too much, and they don't realize how perhaps complicated that can be to answer, especially when you are representations of a little bit of here, a little bit of there. In Africa, you just don't come from here. You come from, like, literally, you're coming from this neighborhood, that neighborhood, because now you're speaking all these languages. You may have been born to a parent that maybe speak two languages, or most of the time it's impossible because they also know other languages as well. So this is just a thing. So when people ask that question, where you're from, it's really a tough one, because now I want to say, well, I grew up in Newfoundland, then it's like you were here, then you were there, then you were there, you were there. How do you, where are you from?
And it's not an important question.
It's
when you're over there, right?
No, it's
because
not. We don't even think about it.
That's right.
It never come up in conversation. But somehow here,
I guarantee you that when my kids were going to school, there was 60 some odd, 60, very near 70 countries represented, nationalities in that school they went to. Well, that's a heck of a mix, right? And so Canada, American, or British, but it really wasn't part of their commerce. It didn't matter to them. Right?
No.
What was more important is, what are we doing today?
What are we
going
doing?
to have some fun? Let's go do something. What are we doing? How do I do this problem in school? Or hey, we got a ball game tomorrow. Let's go to practice. It didn't matter.
Yeah, somehow it is here.